On episode 310 of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Thomas Moore and discuss his book, Ageless Soul. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/310. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness Podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. Hello, and thank you for being a part of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast. I want to send out a special thank you to the folks that did take the time to go out and leave a rating and review on iTunes. I am so close to 150. I'm pretty excited about it. And if you haven't already left a rating and review, please do. I'm going to read some of the ratings and reviews that we've gotten in the last week or so because they're really interesting to me. And I'm really excited that you folks are enjoying what I'm doing here. So the first one I'm going to read is by Cowboy Junkie, and he's from Canada, or she's from Canada. I assume he's from Canada. It's a 5-star review. Great tips as you age. I've really enjoyed listening to this podcast. The two most influential guests were Jeff Horwitz talking about his book, Ageless Strength, and Matt Fitzgerald talking about his book, The Endurance Diet. I got both of their books, and they have really helped me orient myself to better health. Good job, Cowboy Junkie. I'm glad you're getting good material, understanding, that getting into these books is really a great way for you to develop a deeper understanding. We can only cover so much in a podcast, so pretty exciting that you're getting some good benefits and learning about some good books and some good authors through the podcast. Now, next we have Andrew from Australia, another 5-star rating. Never miss it. This podcast has encouraged me to improve my diet, get fit, and focus on the why. I want to be fit for my wife, my kids, and grandkids. I've recently completed the squat challenge, and I'm doing the weight loss program. Alan is always happy to encourage me, and when emailed a question, he quickly responds. I don't agree with everything in the podcast, but since I started listening, I am thinner, stronger, and more motivated. Thanks, Alan. Well, thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate that you've gotten some great value from the podcast, and I'm really glad to have you as a listener. The next one is from Schema Girl, which is from the United States, a 5-star rating. Thanks, Alan. I'm an ongoing training client and podcast listener. We just finished Alan's February squat challenge. With Alan's encouragement, I went with the intermediate level and glad he pushed me to do so. Always enjoy the podcast, motivating, informative, and nice link for listening. Thank you, Schema Girl. I really appreciate that. And then the final one I'll read is from KTJ600 from the United States, a 5-star rating, motivation. I have just finished the squat challenge with Alan and really enjoyed it. I am now doing another program with him. Lots of tips and learning things that I did not know. I listen to the podcast as I walk, and I get a lot of information that can help in my health journey. Thanks for all you do, Alan. And thank you, KTJ600. I really appreciate these. And if you haven't left a rating and review, please do it. It helps iTunes understand that you're getting good material. And I'm really excited the folks that enjoyed the squat challenge and are checking out the surefire results for weight loss. Those items, they're designed to kind of help get you started moving, keep you motivated, and I really like to be a part of those. The Surefire Results for Weight Loss program is free for now. This show is airing on March 12th, and if you are hearing this today, March 12th, you want to go ahead and sign up. You go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/results, and that's going to take you to the sign up page. It costs you nothing through today, through Monday, March 12th, and then I am going to go back up on the price. So a lot of people have gotten into it. They're really enjoying the program. They're seeing great benefits. This is your last day to get it for free, and then I'm going to go up on the price. And the squat challenge was a huge success, and so many people enjoyed it. I'm going to run it again in April. So we're going to go in April 1st. We're going to rerun it. I'm not going to put that link out here today, but I do want you to kind of go out there and have that in mind that if you did the squat challenge with us in February, or maybe you couldn't do the squat challenge with us in February, we had a lot of great success. A lot of people really enjoyed that this time. So I am going to run it again in April, and I encourage you to go ahead and check it out. I'll mention it in a subsequent podcast. And if you're not a member of our Facebook group, because that's typically where I get to announce these things a little bit more frequently and you don't miss them, you can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/group. We have a really nice group out there. We discuss things that are going on in our health and fitness. People share things of what they're doing. When we're doing the squat challenge, you've got so much encouragement and camaraderie out there for that. And so it's really, really cool. So I do encourage you to go out to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/group, and you'll get the beef on what's going on with the podcast, all of our challenges, all of the specials that we're doing. You're going to get that there first, because the podcast only comes out once a week, and I can post to Facebook, when something's coming out. So go ahead and check that out and see if you enjoy that. Our guest today is the New York Times bestselling author of Care of the Soul, as well as many other books on deepening soul and cultivating a mature spiritual life, 3 of which have received the Book for a Better Life award. At turns, he has been a monk, a musician, a university professor, and a psychotherapist. Today, he lectures widely on creating a more soulful world and on spirituality. We'll talk about his new book, Ageless Soul. With no further ado, here is Thomas Moore. So Thomas, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you, Al.
The book, Ageless Soul, is something that's kind of top of mind for me lately. I've been going through some life changes. I'm in my 50s, and so it's kind of at that age where I'm starting to recognize aging a lot more, and you kind of talk about the phases of aging. I do want to get into that. But the book kind of resonated with me. The title of the book resonated with me at first. And then as I got into the book, I just felt like this is a book I probably need to revisit a couple times, a year or something like that, because it really does have a lot of insight and advice that I think is priceless.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. I think when you're turning zeros, or another decade, whatever it is, you begin thinking. I'm interested in that internal experience of aging. What happens to you? What do you begin thinking about? What do you think? What are you afraid of at that point, or what are you looking forward to? That's a very interesting thing. What goes on inside of us.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I kind of clued in on this, and you shared a lot of your personal experiences with aging, and some of your friends and some people that you know, and as I sat back and reflected on that, I could look back at certain points in my life and realize that was an inflection point in aging that I really hadn't wrapped my head around. Like when I was 12, my younger brother died. He had a heart problem, and he went in for surgery, and he died. And that was, I think that was the end of me thinking I was immortal, because at that point I recognized that it is a finite life, and maybe I didn't do everything that if I were a little bit more mature I would have done, but it did sort of change the way I approached a lot of things in my life.
Well, yes. I mean, it's so interesting, even at that early age, relatively early, 12 years old. That is an aging moment. It's such a big thing, isn't it? And it stays with you your whole life. So it continues to age you. It continues to have its impact. So I didn't want to, in presenting these ideas, I didn't want to make it sound as though, okay, you have an experience years ago and it affected you. It stays with you, and you keep thinking about it at times, not always, but it probably comes to mind occasionally. And it affects you. It affects who you are all the way through your life.
Yeah. And so, as I was trying to reflect back and figure out, where I fit on the phases of aging, I want to get back. I'm going to get into that and the other aspects of kind of being younger and being older, because I think that's really kind of where we break this down and realize that we're going to probably ebb and flow between these phases. But could you take just a moment to kind of go through the 5 phases of aging?
Sure. So the first thing that I describe is feeling immortal. So there is that point where you're not really thinking of age. And for most people, it probably lasts 15 or 20 years, where they feel immortal, maybe even longer, that they don't think about the shortness of life or things that can happen. But then there may become what I call the second phase, like a first taste of aging. And that might be very simple, like noticing a gray hair or realizing that you can't quite do physically what you've been able to do up to that point. And that can be a turning point, like an initiation. It bothers a lot of people when they just make that discovery. And you can keep making that kind of discovery. And then it feels to me the third stage would be where you settle more into maturity. So you're not the eternal youth anymore, but you're also not old, really. You're just in the middle of life. And so you are not maybe immortal, but you are so involved in life and what maybe your career and relationships that's where your focus is. And then the fourth stage, I'd say, would be a shifting toward old age. So I think when people are in their maybe late 40s or 50s, they begin to feel a little older, but not old, but feel a little bit older. And that movement toward old age is also a significant one because it demands that you adjust to it in some way. And then the last part is where you really do realize, okay, I'm an older person now. And I think that is a sense of being, of going with time and say, well, there's nothing I can do about this. I'm getting older, and that's the way it is. And you flow with it as best you can.
Yeah, and I was at the bank yesterday doing some business banking, and the guy I was working with there, he was asking me questions about my business, and then he asked me if I was going to train at any gyms or do anything like that, and I said I wasn't sure because I have a very distinct clientele. I only work with people who are over 40, and a lot of gyms wouldn't really want just someone that's that specialized. But he asked why I was into that specially, and I said, well, because they're in a certain phase of their life where their thoughts and their actions align with the way I like to train people. And so I do think there's an age aspect to it, but you still find, and I had this with myself, is that there's an inclination to want to be younger, and sometimes we act that out. For me, example would be I continued to play sports well into my 40s, up until the point where my body actually started breaking. And then that's when, that moment of recognition that, okay, I'm not recovering as well as I need to. And, I need to maybe step this back a little bit, find something that's a little less violent of a sport. As people are kind of going through these phases, one of the things you kind of mentioned, a couple different things, but you kind of talk about it's typically some form of event or something that happens that kind of pushes us into that next phase. Can you talk a little bit about how we move through the phases?
Yes, I do feel that we don't grow in a straight line. We have these periods when we're we have a certain attitude and in a way at a certain age. And then something happens that takes us to another level. And that might be, very often it is a problem, a physical problem, like an illness or an injury, something like that. I know for me, one of the big things was having to have some heart procedure when I was in my early 60s. I mean, that really had a big effect on me, and my family told me how I shifted and changed. Not for the bad necessarily, but they thought I softened because of that. So I do think that very frequently something happens that jolts you and moves you into another phase. And this is something that, I'm a student of religion, world religions, and the religions of the world have rituals so that people have, they're shocked into the awareness of a new phase in life. And I think what happens in our ordinary lives is something similar. The initiation is not planned, but it happens anyway.
Yeah. And so, like I said, as I kind of went back and reflected on those things, I was like, okay, that sort of was the wake-up call that got me to a different point. So it could be where my stepfather basically told me to pack my stuff and go when I was 19. That was an aging moment because it pretty much said, okay, you need to be able to take care of yourself, and that means you need to kind of, get rid of childish ways. I took on a third part-time job so I could continue to pay for tuition and get through school. And then I was like fiercely committed to completing my education and getting a good job. And really for the first, I'd say for the next 10 years, I was so dedicated to career that I didn't necessarily mature evenly on those other parts of my life. And I kind of felt a little disjointed when I got into my late 30s and didn't feel like I had a well-balanced life. And so I think in many ways, and you say this here in the book, and I just love this quote. It says, to age well, you have to be profoundly old and profoundly young. And I think that's where you were talking about Pure and Senex and how, parts of us are going to be younger at points in time and parts of us are going to be older. Can you kind of talk through that concept?
Sure. I get this from my friend who died a few years ago, James Hillman, wonderful psychologist, who in his early work talked about using Latin words, puer senex. So puer means young person and senex means old. We get our word senile from that. And so he says that we have within us throughout our lives this presence, this identity that is young and identity that is old. And they interplay a lot. And in the best of circumstances, one helps the other. Like you were describing, when you're too young sometimes, you're trying too hard to be young. You need that old thing in you, that old spirit in you to say, lighten up, and realize that you're getting older. So it's as though they're in a conversation the whole time, your youth and your age. And I think that's really a good situation. But sometimes they get away from you, and all you do is think about wanting to be young. And as you described, maybe you did the sports too much and your body suffers as a result. Maybe you needed some of that old person saying, hey, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And we have to pay attention to those movements inside us and the voices we hear inside.
Yeah. And I think if you really reflect on it, you're going to hear the better voice for the moment. For me, it was, I need to put the football away and move away from that sport and focus more on other sports that aren't as physically demanding or going to hurt me as much. And so that was a good time for me to listen to that older voice. But there also have been some times where I've said, I need to get moving more. I need to do more exercise, or I need to eat better. And I kind of feel like that's my younger voice telling me, don't go too fast. Don't let yourself fade away physically. You need to stay focused on maintaining good physical fitness. So I do think if you take the time to really listen to your body, the right voice is going to come forward.
Yeah, I agree completely. And what else it does, I think it's interesting, is that we're calling them voices, but they're also like an identity. And because of that, you can be young without being artificial about it. So as you get older, if you make some efforts to stay young that are in tune with your older self, then they can be very useful, I think. I mean, I really feel that it's good for people to try to stay young in different ways. I know you can overdo it and you can go crazy about that, but we have within us this old age and youth, and so I think it's worth it. Even as you get older, you want to be in tune with your aging, but at the same time, you also want to stay young.
Yeah, as we kind of talk about getting older and that younger self, you kind of said something in the book that when I got into it, I thought, wow, I had not really considered this so much, but there's a sadness involved in feeling like you're getting a little older, in that, particularly if you feel like you've gotten past your halfway point, there's an expiry date on you and you're approaching it. So there's a little bit of sadness, some melancholy that kind of at times creeps in to these changes in our lives as we get older. But you said that's a good thing. Could you explain that?
Yes, I do. I think sadness and melancholy are very ordinary, natural emotions that come along at certain appropriate times in life. And one of them is when you get older, because the loss of youth is a sad thing. It should be sad in some ways. I don't mean that you collapse at it and you can't handle it anymore. That's going too far. But if you can recognize that, okay, it's natural to feel some sadness about getting older, that's part of getting older, and it's okay. So you accept that emotion, and that frees you to be happier as you get older. But if you say, I hate the sadness, and you just dwell on it, that means that you will be stuck in it, and you'll never be able to really enjoy your life as you get into older stages.
Yeah, and I think that's so critical, because there is some sadness to it, but there's some things to celebrate. As you go through life, you can't be 20 years old and have a grandchild. You have to be older to have a grandchild. You have to be older to see your kids get married and graduate from school. You have to be older, and so that is just something that's going to happen. So as you kind of have these opportunities for the different experiences that happen through life, if you really take the time to care about it, you won't be so disappointed with the downtimes as to understand that there's so much more to look forward to as you age.
Well, the thing is, we have a lot of emotions going on in us at any one time. So if you simply acknowledge the sadness, then that's only one small emotion, and there'll be many others. There'll be happiness, and there'll be satisfaction, a lot of other things. It's only when you try to keep one of those emotions out that they become dominant. They kind of get in the way. So I think you're absolutely right that when you get older, there are many good things to enjoy. And one of them that you didn't mention that I like is that when you're older, you've got something to give to younger people. And you can't do that if you're younger because you just don't have the experience and you haven't become somebody. This is really the heart of my approach to aging, is that you become someone. It's not that you learn things so much, although that might be part of it, but you actually become somebody who's worth knowing and being around, and you've got something to give.
Yeah, and I like how you say in the book when you're kind of getting into these moments of melancholy, it's kind of a good time to get outside. It's a good time to kind of reflect on that feeling and reflect on why you're feeling that way, because that's probably a life lesson right there for you.
Yes, absolutely. So you do two things at once. You take in the emotion. If it's sadness, you feel it. But at the same time, you can soften it. And I gave some suggestions that I pick up from centuries of thought about this, that people do say that going into nature is a really healing thing to do as you're getting older and wondering about yourself. You go into nature and you see lessons. You don't have to know them, like intellectually. You don't have to understand them exactly when they're being taught to you. But you do notice nature, and you realize that as you get older, you are part of nature. That's a very big part of aging.
Yes. Now, one of the things that's kind of, I think, the clear aspect, you talked a little bit about experience, but I think as we age, we actually get to know ourselves a lot better because we get past a lot of the busy and the other things that were going on in our lives while we were trying to build a career, start a family, everything else. And so we kind of get to a point where we're actually building a deeper and clearer self. Can you kind of talk about how that process works and some of the guidelines that you have for really developing that self that's going to make aging a rewarding process?
Yes, that's absolutely right. I think that's what happens. That you, as I was saying, you become a more complex person, and you're not heroic. You're not in the hero story where you have to go out and slay dragons and you have to accomplish so much and deal with so many issues. What you can do then is reflect more. I use the word contemplative sometimes for that. And I connect it up to the fact that as you get older, in a certain way, you have a natural spiritual sense that you may not have had before because you are thinking more about life and you're seeing things happen. You see what's happening to your friends. That's such a big thing. Your friends and family members, they're aging too, and you're watching and seeing what's happening to them because everybody has a different experience of getting older. So you learn a lot and you're reflecting more. And that changes who you are now. You are a different kind of person. You are you become happier, I think, with aging because you're able to think more deeply about it.
Yeah, I kind of, I guess the way I kind of look at a lot of my aging aspects is that I talk less and I listen more. I know that sounds fairly simple, but I found that the more I just observe and listen, the better I feel now. I used to have to, be a part of the conversation. I used to have to say something, and now I'm finding it's a little easier for me to sit back and listen and learn than it was when I was younger.
Yeah, that's what I mean by not being the hero so much. I mean, you have a little of it probably as you get older, but I think that changes. The percentage changes. So, just as you say, you're able to listen rather than talk. That's really a nice way to put it. And maybe also not have to act every moment, but also be able to observe, to use another word you used. That observing and watching is such a valuable thing. It deepens you to observe. If you're acting all the time, then you yourself don't deepen as a person, because it takes reflection, it takes observing in order to do that. They don't sound like they're very active things to do, but as you age, you find out that actually observing the world gives you something to talk about too, to converse with your friends and family. And when people come to you, and they will, for advice, because you're an experienced person, you'll have something good to give them.
Yeah, and one of the things you kind of get into the book that I really enjoyed, because I just naturally was starting to get to that point, was that you'll probably find that there's a better appreciation for art, for poetry, for written words, for history, and those types of things. So I do find myself more and more wanting to dive into those types of things, and just because they just seem more meaningful to me now than they did when I was younger.
Yes, there is a shift in that direction. It's funny because, in a way, we think of the time for learning as when you're young, because you have to develop skills and knowledge. But actually, there's a different kind of learning that begins to take place as you get older. And it's not one that you need to apply anywhere. It's a kind of learning that gives you pleasure and makes you feel more of a person, I think. Like, you might want to travel a bit to get to know the world more, or you might want to learn a language. Or, as you were saying, you might want to go to art museums and galleries more, because that kind of contemplation is satisfying now. Earlier, it might not have been quite as satisfying because you were so active and so preoccupied with things to do. But now you can relax and enjoy what you see.
Absolutely. So, Thomas, thank you so much for being a part of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, learn more about the book, Ageless Soul, where would you like for me to send them?
I would send them to my website, thomasmooresoul.com.
Okay.
That's Thomas Moore, Moore, soul.com.
Okay. Well, I will make sure to have that link in the show notes, so you can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/310 and find that link there if you don't have ability to write it down right now. But again, Thomas, thank you so much. I really appreciated the book, and I really appreciated having this conversation with you.
I really enjoyed talking with you, Alan, about it. Thank you.
So I want to thank you again for being a part of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast. Really enjoy doing these interviews, and I'm so glad that you're getting something great from it. If you haven't left us a rating and review yet, would you please do that? That's how iTunes lets people know what's trending, what's out there, what people are interested in. It helps people find this show, and I'm really trying to help as many people as I can with the podcast. So anything you can do, rating, review, subscribing, all those things help iTunes know that this is a relevant show. It's something you enjoy and something that you want others to listen to. So you can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/review, and that'll take you to the review section in iTunes, and you can go ahead and leave a rating review there or on the app that you're listening on. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Jonathan Beverly and discuss his book, Run Strong, Stay Hungry. Until then, have a happy and healthy week.